Good morning, and thank you for joining us for another in our series of online programs. My name is Patrice Weaver, and I am the Education Programs Manager with the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust. The Commission is a secular, nonpartisan state agency that strives to preserve the memory of the Holocaust and promote public understanding of the history. Today, we present the first in a new series on rescue and resistance during the Holocaust. Our presenter, Dan Alone, is a member of our Speakers Bureau. He is going to share 3 stories of rescue in Nazi-occupied Europe during World War II, which he calls the Circus, the Zoo, and the Sewer. Now I'll turn it over to Dan.
Now we're going to go to the zoo. This is the zoo in Poland, in Warsaw, and we're talking about Antonia Jan and Ryszard Zabinski. Antonia and Jan was a very well-known zoologist, biologist. He had a radio show, and he built the Warsaw Zoo in the 30s into one of the best zoos in Europe. It was actually a world-renowned zoo. He's author of many, many books. He had a radio show that he talked about the zoo every Saturday. And Antonia, excuse me, his wife was also an author and close to being a concert pianist. They had, at this time, one son, Ryszard, who lived with them. And at that time, they lived on the grounds of the zoo. So this is in Warsaw, Poland. When the Germans attacked Poland, they pulverized Warsaw. They also pretty much destroyed the zoo. Now, 1, because the Germans are cruel, but 2, the Poles had actually set up anti-aircraft guns on the grounds because there was quite a bit of open space on this zoo. So they had set up anti-aircraft guns. There's no such thing as precision bombing. So when the Germans were getting shot at, they hit the zoo. Many animals were killed. Many animals got loose. Then once the Germans came into Warsaw, before things could be calmed down, a lot of the soldiers came into the zoo and started shooting the animals for sport. It's a world famous zoo, elephants on the roof, incredible amount of lions. And one of the things that happened during the war, Hans Brecht, I believe was his name, was a zoologist from the Berlin Zoo. He was friends with the Zabinskis. He also had a crush on Antonia Zabinski. So he would spend a lot of time at that zoo. While he was spending time at the zoo, he was also taking what good animals were left, taking them back to Germany. The elephant that's on the roof was a world famous elephant. It was taken to the Berlin Zoo, and believe it or not, it survived the war. Most of the other animals didn't. Many of the other rare animals were taken to Hermann Goering's estate in Germany, where they were used for hunting. Hermann Goering also kept a pride of lions at his estate in Germany. Now, as soon as the war started, as soon as the Germans invaded, Zabinski became involved in the underground. One of the things that he was doing initially was providing hiding spaces for people that were Poles that were targeted by the Nazis. Then it grew, it morphed into both hiding just about anybody that was on the run from the Germans. Zabinski had grown up, he was an atheist, he was born and baptized Catholic, then became an atheist, and he grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. He had many Jewish friends, also many of the suppliers for this huge zoo happened to be Jewish businessmen. So he immediately started hiding these people. He was mainly a transshipment point. The people would come into the zoo, he would hide them. They would hide below the cages, they would hide in supply barns that were on the property, and at night, in many cases, they actually slept in the cages. So Zabinski is doing all this work. Initially, Antonia had no idea that he was doing this. Then when it started to get really busy, Antonia took part of it. One of the things that the Germans did as a result, since most of the animals were dead, Jan was raising pigs on the grounds to provide pork for the German army. A lot of the pork was He made sure it was tainted, sabotaged, poisoned. It never came back to him. He also was able to take pork into the Warsaw Ghetto. And he would had to have a lot of discussions with a lot of the different rabbis from different groups that would eventually allow their followers to eat pork. He also came in and was supposed to be taking care of some of the green space in the middle of the Warsaw Ghetto. It doesn't make sense, but that's what he did. He would also take a lot of the trash out, ostensibly to feed the pigs. Every time that wagon came out, it had people hidden in it. It had Jews and quite a few children, Jewish children, being brought out in these wagons. So every day, he's risking his life. What I find really interesting is you take a look at this picture. He's holding his son, Rizard. He looks happy. His wife looks really happy. The only person in the picture that's happy is his mother. I mean, pictures tell 1,000 words, but I'll leave it at that. This is a picture of the house that they lived in on the zoo grounds. One of the things that they would do, as I mentioned, Antonia was a concert pianist. She would play a specific song, and I haven't figured out how to get that into a presentation yet, but she would play a specific song, and then the windows were open, and the music would just waft through the air, and people hiding in the cages or hiding in the different areas heard that song, and they knew that danger was coming. And that would be either just German soldiers walking on the ground, Poles coming to see what few animals were left, and then also the Gestapo always on the lookout for people that were hiding. About 300 people passed through the zoo. Majority of them were Jewish Poles on the run. In the house, there was a tunnel that went to an outer space. Now, during the war, if you read Zookeeper's Wife, which, by the way, is a novel based on this story, taken out of Antonia's diaries, but there was a lot more trees. So where this space opened up into the woods, you didn't just pop up into an open area where people could see you. So you could sneak out through that tunnel. It's about 22 feet to the ladder, which you can barely see, where they came out into the woods. Rizard also, different people were hiding in different areas, and they named some of the families or the people that were hiding on different animals. And Antonia would say, Rizard, it's time for you to go feed the bears or something like that. And that was a specific family that he had to go move. One of the funny stories in the book is that this family came and they all had black hair. Everybody in that family's blonde hair, blue eyes. They all had black, curly hair. And Antonia took it upon herself to try to dye their hair blonde. She turned it into a red-orange color. And I think for the rest of the war, they were considered the squirrel family because she had just completely botched their hair as part of the hiding process. You know, a little bit of humor in a horrible situation. And here's some of the people that passed through. As I said, over 300 people passed through the zoo. And this is pictures of them after the war. If you watch The Zookeeper's Wife, which is a great movie, 2017, when the Warsaw Uprising happened, not the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. When the Warsaw Uprising happened, Jan went on active duty. Basically, he was in a uniform. He fought in the Warsaw Uprising, not the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. He was wounded and captured. And what's really unusual is typically, if any Poles rose up against the Germans, they were almost immediately murdered. But at this part of the war, 1944, Germany is extremely short of labor. So even though he was wounded, he was not shot and executed. And many of the men, unlike the Warsaw Ghetto, many of the men from the Warsaw Uprising were then sent into Germany for slave labor. He did survive that. He did come home about a year later, and then they tried to rebuild the zoo. Communism took over. Zoo wasn't anything that they were interested in. It went derelict and actually did not become rehabilitated until the 1990s when the Russians left Poland.
Thank you, Dan. If you have any questions about today's presentation or would like to suggest future topics, please email me. My email address is patriceweaver@holocaust.georgia.gov. Thank you very much.